Hello, lovely Patreon folks. It's me, Sarah. I am hard at work at recording and assembling all the year-end celebration episodes. They are going to be such fun. And I want to thank everyone who volunteered and has set up a recording and sent in a voice memo. This is going to be a great series. And if you'd like to be a part of it, please get in touch as soon as possible. But for our bonus episode this week, I wanted to offer you some support. A few tips for when you desperately want the escape and the relaxation of reading, but you just don't have the brain energy to do it. So I want to set up at the beginning a content warning that I'm going to talk a little bit about mental illness and depression. So if that's not something you can put in your brain, then maybe this is not the episode to listen to right now. I want you to be safe and comfortable, so maybe skip this episode or come back to it in a better time. So first of all, when I get reading burnout, when I just want to read but cannot, for me, that is a mental cue that I need to be more careful with myself. I picture having depression as sitting on the edge of a slope, and that slope is entirely covered with olive oil. And if I don't look and I start to slide, I am farther and farther down into the depression if I'm not paying attention. And the olive oil is always there. I don't know why it's olive oil, but this has been the way I think of it since like 20 plus years ago. So when I feel like things are sliding, one of the first cues is reading is hard, but I need to read. I need to escape. And this is complicated because reading's part of my job. And I know it's good for my brain. There is like that, that specific kind of calm and contentment you get from reading when your brain is in another place and you're super happy. And then you reach the end of the book and you're like, oh, wow, I need to do that again. When I can't muster the mental energy to actually read, I not only feel the loss of the activity and the relaxation time, but I notice how just icky it feels. So in case this happens to you, I have a list of ideas and suggestions to try to get that reading relaxation feeling when you don't have enough brain energy to do the thing where you read the book. I know for some people that might sound really out there, but for me, this happens and it's a very big sign that I am burnt out because the thing that I love most in the world is the thing I don't have the energy to do. So my first tip is to switch format and switch genre. If book reading isn't possible, switch the format of what you're reading. So paper doesn't work for me because the print is always too small. But I've heard people tell me that switching from paper to digital or digital to paper is very helpful for their brains to sort of reset and reconsider reading. It also helps me to not read on my phone because my phone is a device that I use for work and a device I use for distractions. And using my Kindle, which is only books, helps me focus my attention on what I'm doing. For me, though, it is almost always switching genre and then switching format to audio. That is the first thing I try when I'm like, oh, I don't have the brains to read a book. All right, we're going to switch genres. We're going to leave romance for a little while. And we're going to turn on an audiobook. So I love historical mysteries, though I have to be careful with those because often mysteries come with ancillary death, on-page violence. I gravitate towards the cozy end of the spectrum, but as you would probably imagine, I'm still pretty picky. So when I find a series, I read all of it. If it's working, this is what I'm going to stay within. So last year, I did the entire Psy-Changeling series, which are romance fantasy, and I switched back and forth between reading and listening, and that helped me get out of a really big slump. I also re-listen to things, and this is weird because I don't do this normally. I will re-listen to an audiobook in the Murderbot series anytime, any place, no problem. Murderbot 100%, or the Peter Grant series. And that is so weird because that is a massive exception to my general feeling about reading books written by white guys and reading books where the main character is a cop. That is really the only exception series to that one. I also like listening to podcasts, especially when there's a story inside. But podcasts can be very hard to recommend because everyone likes something different. Here is a hot tip for switching genres. There are complete stories in Reddit, in specific subreddits. Like if you really are frustrated with the injustice of whatever you're dealing with, you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling angry, have a look at Malicious Compliance, ProRevenge, and NuclearRevenge. There are also two new subreddits that I've discovered. They're not new. I've just discovered them recently. best of positive updates and best of Redditor updates. So if a Redditor has a story in a particular subreddit and then they come back and update it, the nice thing about best of Redditor updates is that when they are compiled, they will almost always have trigger warnings at the top about the topic and things to be aware of, and they'll be flagged so you'll know what you're reading about. Picking the ones that I read when I am really, really burnt out and my brain is just static and frazzle. That's a complete story. Reading an update of here was my problem and I solved it. It's almost like a complete story arc, but it's shorter and it's like a low dose of whatever brain chemicals I am getting from finishing a book that is just as satisfying. I also turn to AskReddits specifically that are going to make me laugh. Or if you are around my age, the Gen X subreddit is delightful if you want to think about things like fashion plates. Remember fashion plates? I saw a picture of those and suddenly I was 9 and it was fashion plate time. The other tip I want to give you is combining tasks. For me, this is almost always some form of audio story and crafting. If I can keep my hands busy and then also listen to a story, my brain is so happy. And sometimes that craft has to be as low stakes as possible. Coloring books are a great choice. Doodling, cross-stitching, especially when I'm doing a lot of background and it's just the same color. Whatever that repetitive action is, the crafting part, it soothes the fidgety part of my brain that I call the Jack Russell Terrier part of my brain that's hopping up and down and it is distracted. It puts me in a very calm and relaxed state to the point where hours will go by. I think this is called being in a state of flow, and I cannot pronounce the name of the researcher who described it, but it like time passes and I don't even notice. And then I come out and I am just like internally very calm and relaxed. It's just great. Another option is audio plus video game. And here I would like to give my utmost respect and appreciation to Power Wash Simulator. Power Wash Simulator is the greatest thing I've ever done for my mental health. I snuggle under a blanket, I put in an audiobook or a podcast, and I wash things without getting cold or wet. This is the perfect way to low impact unwind for me. Plus, I'm listening to something, I'm having someone tell me a story, and I'm washing a crap out of a fire station or a fountain covered with gnomes. And I love this game. Speaking of video games, that is my next tip. Playing a video game with a story. Now, this is, much like podcasts, a very personal recommendation, right? So video games with stories that I have liked very recently include Pentiment, which is brand new. You are, I kid you not, a medieval scribe in a small town, and you are also solving a murder. And there are pets, and you can pet the pets, you can pet the cats, and you can pet the dogs. There's lots of people to talk to. The choices that you make matter, and the story itself is told in a style of medieval manuscript. And it's just so soothing and thoughtful and interesting. It is fantastic. So Pentiment is my biggest recommendation so far. There is always Stardew Valley. Whatever it is that you want to do, if you want to farm, if you want to fight slimes, if you want to fish, whatever it is that you're into, you want to give Haley a lot of sunflowers so she stops negging you, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Stardew is the game you make it. I like Little Witch in the Woods, though I haven't played a lot of it. And Witchwood is another story, video game, where you're a witch and you have to assemble things and craft things. But all of these games have that sort of cozy aesthetic. I am curious about other story-based games, but I'm very careful, again, like on-page violence and other genres. Some of the video games seem to have themes that will not help my brain against the slide of olive oil. For example, I played a free chapter of a game called Life is Strange, and I felt miserable. It didn't feel good. I know people absolutely adore that game, and it is really well done, but I could not do it. Firewatch is another one where I'm like, oh, this looks really fun, but I've read enough spoilers to think, yeah, I can't put that in my brain right now. Can you guess what my next tip is? Fanfic. Obviously. Fanfic. There is no limit to what you can read. There is no tagging system more robust than AO3. I have AO3 stickers on my car because they had a fundraiser because their traffic in 2020 was absolutely off the chart and they needed a bunch of servers. So I have AO3 stickers on my car. I'm waiting for someone to speak to me about them because it's cool. But there's no limit to what you can read about. Is there a show from when you were a kid that you adore? There's probably a fanfic for it. Do you want to read fanfic about how Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of Nim finally meets up again with Justin, the hot soldier rat? Is that a thing? Yeah, of course that's a thing. There's fanfic about my favorite series, like How to Train Your Dragon. I love that very much. And then there's fanfic about shows that I really enjoyed that, the romance part was not significantly explored. So fanfic is awesome for that. And once you figure out the tag you want and the fandom you want, there's no limit to what you can read. Now, an obvious choice would be television and movies, but this doesn't work for me very well. I think it's because of the sound. I've become increasingly noise sensitive, and there are times when I do not want to listen to other people talking. I also, and I know I've talked about this before in the podcast, I don't always trust TV writers. I don't know about you, but I don't always trust them. I don't trust that they know where they're going, and I don't trust in the completeness of the story. So if I am going to watch something, I am probably going to pick something that has a complete story arc, or that I know where it's going, or I know what to expect. However, for a lot of people, watching TV and movies and miniseries is a wonderful way to put a story in your brain and give you that reading relaxation feeling. My next tip is to combine music and magazines. Now, I can't listen to audio with words if I'm trying to read. I have an enormous playlist of lo-fi hip hop and magazines to read. I have a whole playlist, and then I have a whole saved archive of magazines. Now, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get a certain number of digital magazines every month. And as you've probably seen me write about, libraries have lots of magazines. In fact, my notes here say a butt-ton of magazines, which, yes, is the case. In terms of figuring out magazines to read, there's your obvious sort of, brain candy stuff like People or what used to be, is there still TV Guide? Did you know Parade magazine, the insert in the Sunday paper, that's no longer being published? Like, I would read that digitally. But anyway, when it comes to figuring out what magazines to read, think about the things that make you happy to read about or think about. Maybe that's trains. Maybe it's yachts. Literally, there's a magazine out there for every subject. For me, it is almost always looking at other people being creative. So cross-stitch magazines, embroidery magazines, quilting magazines. I've started reading pottery magazines, like how you make different pots and how people decorate clay. Looking at other people being creative makes me feel very happy and very hopeful, and, combats the olive oil slide. If you have access to digital magazines, the other thing you can do inside Libby through your library is to ask Libby to alert you when there is a new issue. Some of the magazines that I read are quarterly, some of them are monthly. And if I get a little alert, like, oh, I have a new magazine, sometimes I've got like 2 or 3 to read. So it's snack and tea and music and magazine under a quilt with some candles time. And that is very good soothing. My last tip here is when things are real bad and I have no brain energy and I cannot possibly even think about words, I put on my lo-fi, hip hop, or classical playlist and I look at Pinterest. I don't know what it is about Pinterest, but I will start researching paint colors. Like, what colors count as a warm green? How do you decide what color to paint your room? I can tell you something about my house. I've never lived in a house that's younger than me. The house that I live in now was built in around 1995. Every house I've lived in my entire life has been ages older than me, had radiators older than me. And living in a house that's younger than me is really weird. Like, all the doors are square. Like, you close the doors and they stay closed. Like, it's wild. But I am pretty sure that only 4 total rooms of my house were painted. I think I have primer and builder's base coat on most of the surfaces, and I'm not the first owner. I'm probably the fourth owner of this house. So I have some rooms to paint. Do I know how to pick paint colors? No, I do not. So I've been looking at Pinterest for this because it's sort of fun to think, oh, what color can I paint the living room? What color do I want to paint the kitchen? That kind of thing. Pinterest is also great for holiday crafts, easy gifts. And, if you just have a burning desire to look at infographics, Pinterest is here for you. I mean, they're really, really here for you. They're really here for me too. So those are my tips for when I am suffering reading burnout. This is what I do. These are the things that I try. And sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes it's one for one day or I set a timer. You're going to do this for 45 minutes. If it's working, keep going. If it's not, we'll try something else. But having a list of things to try when my brain is like, no words, no book, cannot, is very helpful for me so that I don't panic, because that just makes it worse. As my husband says, having feelings about the feelings. Let's not do that. So what about you? What helps you when you are suffering with some reading burnout? What do you do to soothe your brain when your brains are low on the energy to do the soothing? I would really love to hear your ideas, and I will share them on a future edition of our bonus episodes. You can leave a comment in the Patreon. You can email me. There's lots and lots. You can talk in the Discord. Lots of different ways to tell me. But I would love to know, what do you do when you've got reading burnout? If we can come up with a lot of tips, it might help a lot of us find some quiet, soothing time at a very busy season. Things are weird and scary, and it is very important to look after yourself. So most of all, I want you to stay warm. I am sending you very cozy thoughts, and I would love to hear your suggestions. Thank you for being part of the Patreon. I will talk to you soon.